Hello again, friends. Time for some other news. But once again, I'm going to cover something that's actually right in your face in the news, only because so many people have asked me to respond. And boy, that's the best feeling in the world. To have folks that have tuned in for years or just in class this semester have said, hey, I want to know more about this. Can you talk about this more, Boyer? And I always say, indeed. I can always talk more about just about anything, or at least try. It's a nasty rainy day here in Blacksburg. It was thundering a little while ago. Here it is, May 7th, 2013. And what is it that everybody wants to talk about or wants to hear more about? It's this situation in Syria. And I have hesitated to do a podcast on the Syrian situation because it's so such an entangled web of mischief and chaos and death and destruction, and there's so many different players involved, and there's no way to really predict how a civil war / soon-to-be international war is going to play out. So anytime you start making wild predictions about something that has so many factors put into it, you're setting yourself up for disaster. So I've kind of been slowly just watching the Syrian situation and seeing maybe do I have something to add to this conversation yet? And I think I actually now do. In fact, I just mostly want to, hopefully for just 10 or 20 minutes, talk about the players in this serious Syrian situation that is disintegrating into perhaps regional chaos. There's no good way out. Now, first off, what are we talking about? Everybody knows what we're talking about. Syria's been in a state of civil war pretty much for the last year and a half to 2 years as a continuation or maybe sparked by the Arab Spring, the Arab revolutions in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, and other places where people have gone to the street and said, hey, we want to get rid of our corrupt, dictatorial, autocratic leaders, and we're going to throw them out of office and have some sort of semblance of democracy. All of the places I have mentioned, all of the states of the Arab Spring that have gone this route are far, far, far from stable. Make no bones about it. They got a long way to go to re-peace, cobble back together their governments and their societies and get back on track. So no one's saying this is an easy process, and no one's saying it's even done yet. Far from it. It's just begun. And what's that got to do with Syria? Because Syria is still being undone, much less getting itself back together to start redoing a society. It's been in civil war with multiple players. We're not even exactly sure who is fighting against the government of Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad, I used to think was a decent guy. Now I think is pretty much a villain and a dictator. He inherited the position. It's supposed to be a democracy. Pretty much every country in the world at least pretends they're a democracy now. But it's a dictatorship. It's actually a monarchy. It's a military dictatorship monarchy. It's almost like North Korea, actually. So the military is really in charge of things, and it was a military dictator who took over the country, 60 years ago. And that was Bashar's dad, Hafiz. Hafiz al-Assad ran the country with an iron fist for decades, and then his son has now taken over. He wasn't even the son that was supposed to take over, by the way. Bashar al-Assad was like an optometrist. He was a doctor. He was Western trained. He did not have the dictatorship running through his veins or the quest or love for power, but he got it. His older brother, who was the more dictatorial type, actually died in a car wreck, I think. So it fell to Bashar to take over once Daddy died a decade ago. And most of us, including me, thought that he was a young guy, an educated guy, a pretty, straight-up individual. A lot of us thought that, no, he will liberalize the society, maybe integrate some sort of democratic component into it. Nope. As soon as all this broke out, for whatever reasons that we may never know, he became a full-on dictator, led the charge to start killing his own citizens, 70,000 of which are now dead, maybe more. I don't even know how many displaced refugees, 100,000, 200,000, 250,000. And this place is chaos. Now, who's fighting against him? So it's a military dictatorship style, iron-fisted type of government that's held together their ethnic and religious components for decades. Decades and decades. And now that's coming undone. So what I want to talk about right now is who is fighting and who is from the outside fighting in this, and who's going to get involved and who may never get involved. That is the question that a lot of folks have been asking me that's not easy to answer, but I'm going to try in 10 minutes or less. Here we go. You now know the regime. The regime is raw, iron-fisted power, a monarchy, dictatorship that's trying to maintain their own power, as all leaders everywhere do. Their power is under threat. They're going to try to protect themselves, protect their government. The tricky part of the Assad regime is, for those of you who have taken my class, you already know this stuff, he is an Arab guy, okay? Most Syrians are ethnically Arab, but religiously, he's an Alawite. And Alawites are a subsect of Shia Islam. So right from the get-go, he's actually, him and his clan are actually a minority within their country. A minority government, a minority leader in a minority government that leads the majority of something else, and the majority of something else is Sunni Islam, folks. I do want to go ahead and throw in a parallel here. Gosh, where was another place in the Middle East where there was the guy in charge and his government were actual minorities who led with an iron fist the majority? That was next door in Iraq. Saddam Hussein, an Arab Sunni Muslim, was actually the head of a country who ruled with an iron fist that was mostly Shia. So we see over next door what's happening in Iraq. Gosh, death and destruction that's actually been ramping up. You heard it here first. Iraq is soon to be in a state of civil war. I kind of think they already are, but no one wants to admit that yet. Because it's a ethnically fragmented society that has Shias, that are the majority, Sunnis, who are the minority, and Kurds, who are another minority. And all these parties may never be able to get along. That's Iraq. Oh, wait a minute. That's Syria, too. I could almost stop right there. That's Syria, too, but with the equation scrambled a little bit. The Alawite Shia group is the minority by a long shot, and they have all the power. And they have this power over the Sunni Islamic majority, and there's Kurds there, too. See how similar that is? So what we've had is, as soon as this Arab Spring started, is an unraveling. People, Sunnis who maybe never liked the Assad regime, Sunnis who maybe have an axe to grind against Shias, although I think that's doubtful, or even Kurds. Folks who are in minorities, or actually majority positions, but have no power in the country, saw this as an opportunity to go ahead and overthrow this minority government and establish something else. Now, what is the something else they want to establish? No one knows, including the U.S., which is why the U.S. is extremely hesitant to get involved here. No one knows who the groups are. They're not that organized. They're just called the rebel groups. And so this is why the United States and others have been kind of waiting around to see who kind of floats to the top of this and who's in charge, because we don't want to run in and start arming the hell out of a group of people that ends up not liking the United States or starts a bigger war with a neighbor or stuff like that. Oh, kind of like what happened in Afghanistan. And that's another parallel I want to draw. The U.S. is extremely hesitant to get involved in Syria right now or start arming rebels because the U.S. did that in Afghanistan. Gosh, a few decades back. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and the U.S. said, hey, we have a brilliant idea. We'll start arming local rebels to overthrow the Soviets. What a great idea. We hate the Soviets, just like we hate the Assad regime. Oh, and by the way, the Assad regime and the Soviets, and Assad regime and the Russians, they're good friends. So we hated the Soviets in Afghanistan a few decades ago. We hate the Assad regime in Syria right now. So let's just arm their opponents. Let's arm all these radical, crazy Islamic groups, because, gosh, the enemy of our enemy is our friend. This is going to be a great idea. Not. The arming of radical groups in Afghanistan is what led to the Taliban and perhaps even elements of Al-Qaeda, which has come back to haunt us decades later. That is the United States' primary fear with this situation in Syria right now. Who are we supposed to arm? We're not sure. But I was supposed to be doing this 10-minute talk on all the players involved, and so far I've only covered the Assad regime and the U.S. a little bit. I pointed out particularly that the Assad regime, their family, the greater court around them, and probably the head honchos in the military are Alawite Shia. Why would I point that out? Do I just want to make trouble between religious groups? No. I actually don't understand what the trouble is between the Shias and Sunnis. I'm not Islamic. I don't understand it. There is no great history of Sunni versus Shia violence. There is not. People that are ignorant about such affairs want to play up this angle that it's Sunnis versus Shias and they're all going to kill each other. There's no historical record of that. Periodically in history, violence between Sunnis and Shias here, violence between Sunni and Shias there. No great, though, ongoing saga of violence between these two groups. But we could be seeing it now. And maybe that's where I want to finish off this whole little podcast. Many analysts, myself included, are starting to look at this saying, is the Syrian Civil War the start of a true Shia-Sunni split and divide that may become violent and spread beyond the borders of Syria? What am I talking about? Let's now define all the teams with a finger in this pie of the Syrian Civil War. The Assad regime, Shia. They, for decades, have been supported by, funded by, and fueled money through and arms by Iran, a Shia theocracy, a Shia state, the core of Shia power. The Syrian regime, the Assad regime, has also, for the same decades, been the mover that has moved money and guns from Iran over to Hezbollah. Hezbollah, not a state. Hezbollah is a group. Some call them a terrorist group. Some call them a political group in southern Lebanon. They actually have a political party and hold political seats in the Lebanese government. But other folks consider them a full-on terrorist group because they attack Israel quite frequently with rockets, and sometimes they kidnap Israeli soldiers and things of that nature. This is the kind of Shia axis, the Shia crescent. This is definitely a team that's involved. It's a major component of the Syrian Civil War. The Syrian government itself, supported by Iran, also supported by their Hezbollah friends next door in Lebanon, who they've been supplying and helping for years as an arm of power into Lebanon. Both of these teams are now coming to support the regime. There are Iranian fighters in Syria. There are Hezbollah fighters now moving from Lebanon into Syria to prop up their Shia buddies and friends there in Syria. It's crucial for both Iran and for Lebanon to keep the Syrian power structure as is, because it's the centerpiece. Iran's over here, Lebanon's over here. They need Syria. So that's Team Shia, that's fighting to maintain control of the Syrian situation. Okay, so who's fighting against them? We don't know! I've said this like 3 times. Rebel groups comprised of folks who obviously ain't Shia, obviously ain't Alawite, and obviously don't like the government. But who they are, we're not really sure. There might be 1, there might be 2, there might be 20 different groups of folks who are organizing to shoot at Syrian soldiers, shoot down Syrian helicopters, do whatever they can to overthrow this regime. They are certainly, only one thing we can say is they're mostly Sunni. They are mostly Arab Sunni folks in Syria. And thus we're starting to see, I'm predicting, this divide between Sunni and Shia that hasn't historically been there, but you might actually see it tangibly taking shape now in this mess. Into this fray, add in radicals from around the region and or the world who just like to fight and would like to see Islam take over the state politically. Think entities like Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda is definitely there. So Al-Qaeda comes to the table, and for who knows exactly what reason, but they could be there because they don't like Shias, because Al-Qaeda is pretty hardcore fundamentalist Sunni, and most of them, I think, would consider Shia folks as blasphemous. So they could be in there to fight Shias, but I actually think more probable is that Al-Qaeda types are in there to overthrow this secular dictatorship to try to make Syria into another Islamic state, not unlike Iran. See where this is going now? So you have other elements who are in there fighting for a grander thing. They don't care either way about the people of Syria. They want to fight for an Islamic theocratic state of Syria. That's probably not going to happen, but we do not know that. So that's why, again, back to the U.S., that's why the U.S. is looking at this going, well, if we put a bunch of money and guns in there, who's it going to get to? Could it get to Al-Qaeda? Could it get to other Islamic extremist elements who want to overthrow this state and make it into a theocracy after modeling it on the Iranian thing? The U.S. don't want to see that. By the way, Russia doesn't really want to see that either, which is why the only exterior power that's supporting the Syrian regime right now is Russia, classic old school Cold War ally of Syria. And so Russia, Vladimir Putin for his part, it's like, no, we need to keep everything the same. This dictator is the best thing we got going because you guys don't know who's going to take over after that. And the U.S. is saying, you know what, you're right. We don't know who's going to take over after that, but we really don't like Assad. And we see this going nowhere, and all this is just going to continue to just grind down to the tune of thousands and thousands more civilian casualties. So the world's watching this saying, we don't really want this. And the Russians maybe don't want this, but the Russians are saying this is better than anything else that's going to come after, and maybe they got a point. Okay, let me get back to the teams though. So Russia's also supporting Syria politically. Russia will veto any move at the United Nations to intervene into Syria. So that's why this is another tricky aspect of this is the United Nations will do nothing. They can do nothing. There will not be a United Nations resolution or a UN anything in Syria. Russia's already promised to stop it, and they will. So it's left up to outside entities. How are we going to get involved? Are we going to get involved? And or are we just going to watch the civil war claim the lives of another 10, 100,000, 500,000 people and grind down endlessly while people die? I don't think people are going to let it happen anymore. By the way, personal aside here, I do not think the Syrian regime can stand for much longer. They may last for 6 months. They may last for a year. They may last for 5 years. But the genie is out of the bottle now. And this is a genie that simply cannot be put back in. Bashar al-Assad and his crew can kill lots more people. No doubts. They can kill lots more people. But they can't kill them all. And so all they're doing at this point is killing to maintain power, tenuous power, that they'll have to continue to kill as many people as possible for the rest of the time they're in power. There will never be a lull. There'll never be a peace treaty. There'll never be anything like that. That's over. That time has passed. So this is all, everyone's now all in on this fight over Syria. Let me add one more thing because I see we're already almost at 20 minutes. And this is what made me think to do this whole podcast. Israel over the weekend bombed Syria. Okay. That may be a game changer. What's up with Israel getting involved here? Israel and Syria never liked each other, hate each other, been at war with each other multiple times. Israel actually controls a part of Syria called the Golan Heights. Is Israel getting involved now to accelerate this war, to try to pull in the United States and others? No. Israel, I believe, has made it quite clear, and by the way, Israel's actually not admitted they actually did bomb Damascus, but everybody knows they did, including the Syrian government, the U.S. government, and everybody else. They bombed specific sites over the weekend that were carrying missiles, possibly chemical weapons, possibly something else, again, we'll never know, that Israel says were bound for Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a sworn enemy of Israel. So Israel is now involved in the Syrian war as well. But Israel's saying, hey, we're not trying to get involved to liberate the people of Syria. We are simply here for self-defense. And Israel is looking at this mess saying, this is all chaos up here. And in chaos, lots of money, guns, possibly chemical weapons and missiles could be moved over to those guys in Lebanon, those Hezbollah guys, who are starting to come across the border into Syria anyway to support the regime. And Israel's saying, nope, that's a non-starter for us. So that's why they're bombing Hezbollah positions now within Syria, and they're bombing any convoys that they will interpret as arming Hezbollah folks, which they consider a threat to their state. Could it get any more complicated? Probably, but those are the main players that I am looking at this mess saying, okay, here's who's involved. You have a Shia crescent, a Shia axis of power, the Iranians, Hezbollah, supporting the regime. Russia supports the regime not because they're Shia supporters, but because they're Cold War allies from way back when, and Russia sees the dictatorship as the best possible outcome for Syria right now. And that team is fighting against a whole hell ton of locals that we're not exactly sure what their motives are, but there are some groups like Al-Qaeda and other Muslim extremist groups in there, as well as, I guess, the good guys, for lack of a better term, that we hope are Arab Sunni and Kurds who just want to liberate the state of Syria and have a democracy. that seems like an awfully shallow hope. But that is the hope that what the United States and outsiders are banking on, that I guess those are the people we're going to give money and guns to. And hope at the end of the day, if that group overthrows the Assad regime, that then they'll make something that we like and can play nice with. That seems like a desperate straw to be grasping at, and the U.S. knows it, which is why the U.S. has been dragging its feet on getting involved in this. And, of course, the final one is Israel is now involved, perhaps for no other reason but for self-defense of their own state. They're going to go ahead and be proactive and start attacking Hezbollah and Syrian government elements that they see as potentially running chemical and or missiles to Hezbollah. So now, there you go. Did that help answer for you? It's just as simple as that. That's what's going on in Syria. At least that's the players involved in Syria. And again, to finish, why the United States government, led by President Barack Obama, is looking at us going, we've tried to arm rebel groups in the past in murky situations, and sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. So we're not sure who to give money and guns to. Oh, I'm sorry, I did forget. I know I'm at 21 minutes. One more thing. The other Arab states don't like the Assad regime either. So, because other Arab states are mostly Arab Sunnis. So you have Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, perhaps Egypt. I don't know. They're a wild card. But definitely Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states are like, yes, we actually want to give money and guns to the rebels. They probably already have been. The United States has probably been telling Saudi Arabia, hey, can you not do that yet? Because we don't know who the rebels are. But I believe what you're going to see is the United States relax that attitude and probably say, well, we might start arming the rebels, but we'll at least go ahead and let the Saudis and the Jordanians start arming the rebels because they want to do it anyway, and the Kuwaitis. So Team Arab, there in the rest of the Arabian Peninsula, no friend of Assad, even though he's Arab too, no friend of Assad. And so to back it all up, boy, look at that blue, by the way. To back it all up and think about this, bigger repercussions of this disintegrating Syrian situation. I hate to say this, but it's starting to truly look like a true Shia-Sunni divide because of the way that the teams are lining up, and it's so well defined. That Shia axis that's trying to maintain Assad in power because it's crucial to keep their axis of power going, and the Arab Sunni other side that doesn't like Assad personally, doesn't like his politics, maybe doesn't like his religion, and that's where people are now starting, that's the lines that seem to be drawn where people are shooting each other at. Nasty, nasty business. And what does the U.S. do as an outsider? Who the hell knows, but we're going to find out, as you're likely to see the U.S. get involved at least tangentially by starting to arm somebody. Once we can figure out who we want to arm, that will be in our best long-term interest, which may be nobody. Sorry for the long rant, but lots of folks had asked me about Syria, and I wanted to at least throw out some information about the groups at play in this horrific human tragedy that is the Syrian Civil War that may be turning into a larger regional confrontation between Sunni and Shia or Arab versus Persian power. But for now, we're out.